Hello everybody, welcome. It is Thursday, December 19th, and I wanted to share this book with you that I discovered more recently at the Iowa City Public Library. It's called Explaining Life Through Evolution by Prosanta Chakrabarty. It was written in 2023, so it was very recently published, which is awesome. And Prosanta Chakrabarty is a professor of evolutionary biology at Louisiana State University. He's been teaching there for a long time. He also has given TED Talks on evolution, and he honestly didn't quite know until before he wrote this book, however recent that was, that he came to the realization that many people didn't quite understand modern day evolution. They were still kind of stuck in an outdated mentality that Darwinism created. And in that regard, I mean in terms of linear and hierarchy, that human evolved from an ape. And it's a lot more complex than that. We are closely related to apes, yes, but the reality is that we are related to everything. And so it's really like addressing more of a web of life versus a hierarchical view, like a pyramid with plants and fungus being at the very bottom, humans being at the very top, and then that linear phase of ape to man, which is not accurate. And so Chakrabarty is talking about that in this book, and he's describing the web of life, how we're all connected to one another. And so he does talk about Charles Darwin's theories, and then he also talks about Gregor Mendel's theory of variation in genetics. And that guy was a priest, from what I understand, who loved peas. So he discovered genes and gene variation in pea plants just from having plant experiments. And so he was able to see these changes happening with his plants without a lens. And it's amazing because all this time later, we finally understand gene variation, mutation, so on and so forth. Whereas back then, he was starting to see it with the naked eye, which is amazing. And then I was reading about a woman, I'm going to look at my bookmarked area here, named Barbara McClintock. In the 40s, she discovered jumping genes, really the movement of sections of DNA from one part of a genome to another that could lead to phenotypic changes, including variation in pigmentation patterns or even increased susceptibility to certain diseases like colon cancer. And her research led to an entirely new avenue for understanding hereditable change. So she helped us understand that these changes in our DNA have either profound effects or no effects at all. And what I've read in Chakrabarty's book is that a lot of gene mutations don't have negative effects on us. And there are a lot of gene mutations. Some of which, I'll give you an example I found, is that person who eats cilantro and has a soapy, thinks it's like soapy tasting, that is actually a gene mutation. And that's an example of something that doesn't like make your life difficult. It's just something you notice, and maybe it's kind of bothersome, but you just don't eat cilantro because you don't want it to taste like soap. That's one example. Another thing I'd like to point out in the book that I think is really profound, so profound, it's shifting my belief system, as a matter of fact, is, and this is on page 49, by the way, of Explaining Life Through Evolution, if you're interested in reading it, page 49 is where I had just a profound shift in belief system. So this is what I'll read to you on page 49. The term fittest, as we modern evolutionary biologists use it, is related to reproductive fitness or success, not to how physically strong a living thing is. Crazy, right? Many have misinterpreted natural selection as survival of the strongest, with terrible consequences for how we treat one another and other living things on Earth. Survival of the strongest is a popular theme of eugenics, white supremacy, and Nazi movements, which unfortunately are sometimes associated with Darwin as social Darwinism, a notion that is neither Darwinian in origin nor relevant to how evolution actually works. So then they talk about how it was unfortunate that Darwin had a cousin named Francis Galton, who was a eugenics leader, who even coined the term eugenics, as was Herbert Spencer, who had coined the phrase survival of the fittest. And associations with these two men are partly why Darwin is linked with eugenic distortions of his ideas, even though he never made the same arguments that eugenicists did. Sorry, the word eugenics and eugenicists, kind of tongue twister words. So I read that. That was on page 49 and 50 of Explaining Life Through Evolution, if you want to look for it yourself. That was profound for me because I've noticed this tendency in our society, in our world, for us to compete with one another and think that that is the survival of the fittest, is to compete with one another. Now that I have this explanation that that's not what Darwin intended, and that this is what it actually means, is that if you're able to reproduce, you are the survival of the fittest. Why? Because you're spreading your genes. It's just like a huge light bulb moment for me, and it just shifts so many perspectives I've had, because that's what other people were putting out there. It was what I kind of grew up with, as somebody who had to read the Bible, whether she wanted to or not, because it was like, you have to do this or your soul is at risk. I mean, literally the facts, and this is what Chakrabarty talks about in the beginning. It's like, we are proving facts and disproving non-facts, right? Science is about proving facts, and not everything can be proven, yes. So he's talking about how there are people who still believe that the earth is flat, and it's because they mistrust science. So he's very humble in the beginning of his book, and he even asks that his readers trust him, give him a chance. And it's really wonderful. He's such a humble scientist, and I think that's really, really unique. And this book, I'm not done with it yet, but I just wanted to share my findings because they're so profound. And just understanding genes and how we're created through DNA and how our DNA is passed down and how our our genes are given to us by both parents and what that means is pretty fascinating. And the fact that we're all connected, which I really have believed for a very long time. It's what the Native Americans believe, and it's just now it's scientifically proven. It's just incredible. So if you want to learn more about modern evolution, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book, Explaining Life Through Evolution by Prosanta Chakrabarty.